I start right away with the EU member state innovation performance. This is a EU scoreboard based on over 30 indicators on R&D, in-house developments in small and medium-sized companies, etc. And what you see is, that's my main message here, that Finland, Denmark, Sweden and Germany are regarded in Europe as the innovation leaders. This brings me directly to the subject because these are countries with high taxes, strong welfare states, regulated labor markets, strong unions, and low income inequality. This is not the case in Germany. There are differences between countries, but still it shows that there is obviously a possibility to be innovative and have strong regulations. And why are these countries innovation leaders? This is an important question. There might be two explanations. One, there are the beneficial constraints of labor market regulation, which direct employers to high road strategies because they cannot compete on wages, but they have to compete on quality. And some of these countries may have created complementary institutions to create virtuous circles between the employment model and the innovation system. And these complementary institutions could be investments in skill. And many years ago, I did with Jon Erik Dolvik, Richard Freeman, Jill Rubery, a project on the evaluation of the Norwegian labor market. And the question was how making solidarity work and how did it work in Norway, also in the other Scandinavian countries. And we found a term the system is based on cheap, skilled labor. They have high labor costs, but they invest a lot in skills. So in international competitions, they have cheap, skilled labor with high internal flexibility. And the second element is the innovation system, a lot of investments in R&D, which you find in the Scandinavian countries and also in Germany. I will look at the German manufacturing industry, which is regarded as very competitive from outside, and you can see that Germany still has quite a high and stable level of manufacturing. And if you would include all the links with services, about 40% of employees in Germany depend still on manufacturing. And why is this the case? I see four reasons for the strong manufacturing sector in Germany. First, the high-tech strategy, which is based on investment in R&D. A second, which is not an innovation element, it's a price element, the internal devaluation within the Eurozone through wage moderation. The third is high skill level, and the fourth is high numerical and functional flexibility. And these 4 points do not show in the same direction. On the one hand, the German model is based on a highly regulated segment, and on the other hand, on a deregulated segment with low coverage by collective agreements and no works councils. I go through these 4 elements and try to draw some conclusions from this. The first is R&D, and what you can see is here the expenditure for R&D in percentage of the GDP, and you see it's quite high in Germany compared to many other countries at the level of 2.9% of GDP, and what is important, 2/3 of this expenditure is coming from companies. In the US, 2/3 are coming from the state, which makes an important difference. You can also see that Sweden and Finland really invest in R&D, and this is an important story because the Scandinavian models had to be modernized and complemented by innovation strategies to become economically viable, and you can also see some countries like Korea are going the same way. And Germany is doing quite successful. If you look at all the indicators like transnational patents, you see the green bars represent Germany, and in other innovation indicators, Germany is doing also quite well. What is important is how much is that linked with labor and work? In Germany, there was a so-called high-tech strategy formulated. This was an initiative by business leaders. The former SAP CEO was urging the German government to focus R&D on special thematic priorities, for example, on health, mobility, resource efficiency, the smart factory, etc. And the unions demanded in the last coalition agreement between the Social Democratic Party and the Conservative Party in 2014 that this high-tech strategy should include a kind of follow-up of the former humanization of work research programs from the 70s. This was a copy from the Scandinavian programs. Now they succeeded. The new federal R&D program programs include a program on innovation in work and services for the next 5 years. And the goal of the union were 3 goals. First, they were quite aware that you need early intervention in the design of work organization in this program on Industry 4.0, the new digitalized smart factory, because otherwise the work organization is also already integrated in the design of the new technologies. Secondly, they want to develop prototypes with decent working conditions, which includes health and safety, of course, but also job enrichment and decentralized work organization based on skilled labor. And there are different visions of new technologies. The more Anglo-Saxon vision is a more hierarchical system of the use of new technologies. And finally, they want with this knowledge to support works councillors in shaping working organization at an early stage. So this is, from my point of view, something like the creation of redundant capacities to create opportunities to cope with a changing environment. And it's a little bit different from the Danish experience, because the unions really want to be in the situation to be able to support works councillors at the plant level to influence work organization. The second element is the devaluation. You see the spotted red line. This reflects Germany. These are the changes in unit labor costs, and you can see that Germany had the slowest wage increases and slowest unit wage cost increases in the EU. This created enormous imbalances in Europe. You see the black bars. These are the export surpluses of Germany, and they are reflected by deficits of other countries. And what is important for innovation? What does this mean for innovation? There's a high price to be paid in Germany. We had a growth of the low-wage sector. And from my point of view, this had a strong negative impact on innovation in many areas, because it helped company to move from the high road to the low road. And we have examples that there's a comeback of business models based on cheap labor, low skills, hierarchical work organization, and lower productivity. And in some areas in the construction industry, even simple work with shovels is coming back, because labor became, posted work from other countries became so cheap. And there are many hidden costs in this low-wage work, for example, higher accident rates and also lower productivity. And what we need is to do more research on the negative impact of low labor standards on innovation and productivity, because very often companies are not even realizing the hidden costs of these low-wage work. The third point are investments in skills. Germany invested heavily in skills. We have a reduction of the share of unskilled employees from around 64% in 1964 to 15% in 2015, which means that in the manufacturing industry, to become a member of the core workforce, you need to have a certificate in our vocational training. The unskilled and semi-skilled people, workers nearly disappeared in the core sectors of the industry. They have mainly about two-thirds of employees have at least a vocational certificate based on a 2 to 3.5 years training, a very broad training in the German apprenticeship system, and the apprentices rate is about 6% of the workforce. And on top of this, there are promotional training in all occupations to the master technician or in services to the business administrator level, which is on level 6 of the European qualification framework. And this has a strong impact on innovation in companies, like in Denmark, as was explained by in the last session. And the social partners agreed to create broader occupations than in the past and introduce new learning forms reflecting modern decentralized forms of work organization. And these reforms of vocational certificates at national level are always a compromise between modern and traditional companies. And if you implement a new curricula, this means this is an innovation stimulus for traditional companies. And this is only possible with the advice of chambers, etc. And this is an example of the metalworking trades. We had in 87, 45 different curricula, very specialized. In 2004, we only have 5 left, and with 50% overlap, so that they can easily cooperate, and there's integrated learning. And the learning forms changed substantially from the classroom orientation, producing small products, and now the whole system is based on learning in business processes from the order to delivering a service or a product to the customer, which is a completely different way of learning, and it's a learning to be socialized in flexible teams and working with other trades. And the outcomes of the broad training are very similar to what Per Hall explained of the Danish example, where you have similar types of vocational training. It promotes decentralized work organization with more autonomy at the shop floor. So in German companies have less supervisors than, for example, British companies. There was done a nice study by Paul Ryan and others comparing German and British machine tool companies. In Germany, there were 4% of employees in the bottom layer of management compared with 11% in the UK. So it is really also a cost advantage for companies. And what is very important, the communication flow is much better if the middle managers are recruited from the skilled shop floor. They can really communicate with the engineers, while in countries where you have strong tertiary education and not sufficient vocational training, there is a kind of ceiling between the academic level and the shop floor with many problems of communication. And this allows more incremental innovation, specialization in products of higher value. And what is very important, it is important for the dissemination of innovation in small and medium-sized companies, because small and medium-sized companies don't have special innovation departments. Innovation in these companies depends completely on the skills of the workforce. And here you can see in green, these are the countries where you have high product and process innovation, and you see Germany in green, Switzerland as well. Probably surprising is Portugal and either included. This is the question is always asked: do you have more product and process innovation compared to the years before? And so it's relative to the countries. That this explains probably the surprising results of Portugal. And finally, my last point, internal flexibility. If you have employment legislation and job protection, and dismissals are not easy for companies, you have to give companies some flexibility back, especially if the environment is getting more volatile than in the past. So in the last 2 decades in Germany, the social partners agreed on a new toolbox for working time flexibility. The unions didn't like this idea at the beginning, but they had to make concessions in exchange for working time reductions. So it was not voluntarily, but at the end there were found compromises which had positive impacts. And 50% of German enterprises have working time accounts where you can save overtime hours and distribute hours flexible over the year or over 2 or 3 years. And most collective agreements allow temporary reductions of standard weekly working hours. If there's an economic crisis, the state supports short time in the financial crisis up to 24 months. And this allowed the German job miracle in the big recession where hours were dismissed and not workers. And this was very important because the short-time scheme and this working time flexibility was a kind of industrial policy to save the industrial fabric of the country and retain skilled workers in a deep crisis. And here you can see the figures. You can see that nearly 100% of the percentage of fall in total labor input was due to working time reductions in Germany and not due to dismissals of employees. I come to my conclusion. The first is there's a strong impact of public policy and labor market governance on innovation in both directions, positive directions, but what is very important, also in negative directions. So if you allow wage competition, this means that companies probably go back to traditional, less innovative business models. And what is important, the positive impacts are the base of political alliances between labor and capital, and labor in itself alone is too weak to defend labor market regulations. There must be some advantages for companies in these regulations as well. And making solidarity work, this was the title of this book on Norway, requires, therefore, the proactive modernization of employment models like the toolbox on working time flexibility or the modernization of the training system. And the main pillars of these are upgrading skills, developing internal flexibility, and expansion of R&D. Thank you very much.